Well, we're sitting now at about 8 minutes after 12 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And do you remember in elementary school, we used to separate the boys and the girls? We'd pull the girls aside and show them a video about menstruation, about here are all the changes you can expect as you turn into teenagers. No one does this with all the 40-year-old women. No one takes us aside after the big birthday party and says, hey, sweating, weird times, weight gain, periods that go on for weeks. Yeah, those are some of the changes you 40-year-olds can expect in the coming decade. Well, today on the show, we are going to speak with women who are becoming experts in this field. We'll also check in with a Cree woman who's pulling together as much as she can in terms of traditional knowledge about menopause and this whole transition. Yes, we are talking about menopause, mental health. Today we're talking hot flashes, weight gain, the mood changes, the way that sleep can get so messed up. Today we have the Canadian Medical Association Journal publishing an article telling doctors women are suffering needlessly. When you have women who come in with these debilitating symptoms, hormone therapy should be a first line of defense. So today here on Blue Sky, we're asking, what is menopause like for you? What's it been like? What do you wish you'd known in the years leading up to it? What do you wish your doctor had known? Let's welcome Jennifer Gordon to Blue Sky. She's an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Regina. Jennifer Gordon's also the director of the Women's Mental Health Research Unit. Jennifer, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And we also have at this time Amanda Scollan. Now, she's a nurse practitioner. She's also become a certified menopause practitioner through the North American Menopause Society, and she works out of Brownstone Health. She's based in Regina. Hello there, Amanda. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
Well, and I'll put this question out to both of you. What do you make of the news, this article being published today saying, hey, doctors, when women come in with these debilitating symptoms, you should prescribe hormone replacement therapy as a first-line treatment. Jennifer, what do you make of this?
I mean, it's exciting. It's refreshing. I've been sort of touting the same message for a little while now. I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of North Carolina, and there I was involved in a big hormone trial, actually, that looked to see whether transdermal estradiol, so that's an estrogen patch, whether it could prevent the development of depressive symptoms in the menopause transition.
Oh.
And we found it to be very effective compared to placebo. But we published our results in a pretty respectable journal, and got an excited response, but also a lot of flack, a lot of pushback, because what are you saying, that everybody should be on estrogen now? That's potentially dangerous. And so there was a lot of a concern. So I feel like I've spent a lot of time over the last several years, justifying and explaining that our original thinking around hormone therapy and the dangers associated with it have been debunked, and we have a better understanding of how it can be prescribed safely.
And just for our listeners who are tuned in and going, okay, so now we are telling doctors, consider this as a first line of treatment for women who come to your office with these symptoms. And up to now, I mean, we still have the Canadian Cancer Association saying, yeah, be cautious about it. But this is really a message to doctors right across Canada saying, we need to consider this more as a first line. How many doctors have you found out there who are a bit leery or reluctant to prescribe hormones, Jennifer?
I wonder if Amanda could probably speak to that.
Yeah.
She works more closely with physicians.
Come and jump in there, Amanda.
Perfect. No, I'm excited to weigh in. I think that there was a lot of hangover, essentially, from a big study called the Women's Health Initiative in the early 90s and the early 2000s. And what ended up happening is I think that there was a period of time where we kind of thought that hormone replacement therapy was going to be a fountain of youth for women. And so they took a huge number of women globally and put them on, at that point in time, oral estrogen as well as oral synthetic progestin. And what they ended up getting some bad outcomes in certain patient populations. So they saw more stroke and more breast cancer. And so at the time, it was kind of a reaction that they pulled all of those women off of systemic hormone therapy. But globally, there was this, fear. And so many women were not prescribed hormone therapy for decades, essentially, because of the fear of those bad outcomes. What we've had the chance to realize and appreciate in the last decade is that it really should be a very individualized approach, and that most of those bad outcomes really occurred in a much older patient population, so women that are further away from that menopausal transition or women that are over age 60. So I think it's really, really important when we're talking about anything that we kind of take a balanced approach. So I think that when we're looking at hormone therapy and a prescription, it's not a magic wand to fix everything for everybody. And I definitely caution patients and prescribers from that, but it can definitely make a huge improvement for many women in their quality of lives with many of these symptoms at the perimenopausal and menopausal transition for sure. So what I see in clinical practice is definitely lots of women that have suffered for a long time and struggled and presented to different healthcare providers and never ever had the conversation about systemic hormone therapy and the potential risks and benefits, and if that might be an option that could dramatically improve their quality of life.
Yeah. Well, and this is what we are asking today on Blue Sky. What do you wish you'd known in the years leading up to menopause? What was it like for you? Is it like for you? The number to call is 1-800-716-2221. Blue Sky at cbc.ca is our email. And I know we have a call from Tara. She's pulled over on the road near Meadow Lake. Tara, I'd love to hear from you on this. How are you thinking about menopause these days?
I wasn't too happy about it. I'm 44, and I thought a little bit early myself, but I found this amazing product. It's a natural herb, and it comes in the form of a tincture, and it's called red clover. And you can get it on Neepsy on a Facebook page, and it took my symptoms away within a week. I took the tincture, half a drop twice a day, and my night sweats, my hot flashes were gone within a week, and I haven't had to take it again since.
Ah, okay. And so how long were you dealing with the night sweats and the hot flashes until you found this?
Probably about 4 months.
Oof, what was it like?
I got an ablation about 3 years ago, and it kind of kicked off early menopause for me, and yeah, wasn't too happy about that. But I found this amazing natural product that works so well, and I've just been trying to tell everybody about it, as many people as I can, because it's so effective and it just took all my symptoms away.
Red clover. All right. Thank you for the call today, Tara.
No problem. You're welcome.
That is Tara, who gave us a shout today at 1-800-716-2221. And yeah, whether it's mental health, mood changes, messed up sleep, weird periods that go on for weeks, we are here to talk about menopause today. And that doesn't mean that men, you need to just pause the radio and turn it down. If you actually want an inside track into what's happening to the women you love, I would keep this on in the background if I were you. This is where I'd like to come back to you, Amanda. And I know that Tara was talking about red clover and different types of vitamin supplements. I know I've heard my friends talking about them too. What do we know about, if you're not interested in the hormone approach right off, what can women do when they start noticing symptoms like Tara did?
So, Jennifer, we don't have good evidence that any of the herbal supplements are effective. Placebo effect is definitely a very real thing in menopause or any other pharmaceutical therapies. So we know that up to 40% of the patient population will feel better if we give them anything. There's not high-quality evidence that red clover or black cohosh or evening primrose oil offer any benefit above placebo long-term. And there are also different products that are available, that women will bring in from the United States and those sorts of things like progestin-type creams that they derive from yams and those sorts of things. I think a lot of that gained much popularity after Frankie and Grace on Netflix. But basically, we know that those things are not regulated, so there's concerns definitely from a safety perspective, and that they're not medically proven to offer any benefit above placebo. In saying that, every single patient is unique, every body is unique and responds responds differently to things. And whether it's an approved pharmaceutical therapy or a herbal supplement, I always say it's best that we take an individualized approach to these things because everybody's different and everybody's going to respond to things differently. And everybody's baseline health is different. So that definitely is different risks for different patients based on what their underlying medical conditions are.
And I think that also speaks to women searching for answers kind of wherever you can find them, because so often we hear the experiences of women who go and they tell their doctors about this. Sometimes you go to the doctor and you hear complaints. They don't take them seriously. We've actually got more callers calling in today. So at 1-800-716-2221, we do have Amanda Scollan who's on the line with us. She's a nurse practitioner, a certified through the North American Menopause Society, and she works out of Regina. We also have Jennifer Gordon, who's an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at the U of R on the line. Vanessa is on the line from Moose Jaw right now at 1-800-716-2221. And Vanessa, go ahead. Welcome to Blue Sky. And I'm kind of wondering what your questions are for our guests or how menopause has gone for you so far.
Yeah, I'm so glad that this is part of the program today, because what an amazing opportunity to tell women in our mid-40s, hey, what you're going through is probably pretty normal, because a lot of us are figuring out that, oh, the generation before us did go through this stuff, but they never talked about it. So I'm glad this is a topic for today. The reason for my call today is a few years back, I'd been noticing some chest pain, just a sharp stab once in a while. It wasn't related to anything in particular. Kind of ignored it and then thought, I'll just go in for my annual checkup. My doctor said, that's not normal. Let's check this out. What else has been going on in your body? So I kind of had mentioned to him, some odd irregularities in my cycle and some different things that kind of pointed toward perimenopause. And he said, Dawn, I think we want to send you for some more testing because what you are experiencing in your chest pain, that's not normal. Turns out I have cardiac microvascular dysfunction, which is often triggered by a drop in estrogen, which is part of the heralding of the beginning of menopause, which, again, everybody turns toward Dr. Google to figure out, okay, is this a thing? Is this common?
Weird? What do I do?
Exactly. And so it is not uncommon. It's just not maybe caught as soon as in my case that it was. So for anybody out there listening, it can be a thing. If your heart is acting up, don't ignore it, right? I feel like you said, a lot of women just kind of suffer through things when it could point toward some other underlying health conditions that are brought on by the beginning of menopause.
That is such a good point to make. Thank you for this, Dawn.
No problem.
This is the lines are open to you today. The number to call, of course, 1-800-716-2221. Now, listening in, Jennifer Gordon, who's an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at the U of R. And Jennifer, I know you've studied menopause at length. You've looked at the different research, especially in terms of the estrogen patch and hormone therapy. Does that sort of line up, the losing estrogen and then looking at some heart conditions? Does that line up with what you know about women's health up to now?
Estrogen has a lot of positive effects for our health, including our heart health. It is protective. And so it makes sense. Most people are not going to have severe health problems when they enter the menopause transition, but I think it's important, and it sort of brings up the idea that there's a fine line between, recognizing the problems that come with the menopause transition and hot flashes and all of that stuff. And a lot of it is normal, but then also recognizing what's not normal, right? It's, not just, oh, well, this must be part of it, I guess, and I'll just kind of deal with it. So that's great that she went to her physician when she was concerned.
Awesome. And I know that we actually have a little bit of tape lined up here. This is because so many women say, I've gone to my doctor, and when I say I'm having this issue or that issue, and they all kind of line up with perimenopausal symptoms, the stuff you experience before those periods stop. Well, our comedian, Hannah Gatsby, said it's hard to get doctors to take us seriously.
Perimenopause is a strange thing because it's one of those things that's a thing at the same time that it's not a thing. It's incredible. What perimenopause does, I don't know if you know about this, but what perimenopause does, what it does is effectively it strips away, completely strips away a doctor's diagnostic skeletal system. That's what it does. They tell you you're perimenopausal, then it's backbone out. They're just floppy all of a sudden, like nothing. You press them for details, like, what is this perimenopause? And like, well, you'll get this cluster of symptoms that'll last anywhere between 1 and 55 years. And then at the end of it, your bones will hollow out and you'll die tinier. And you press them for what symptoms? What symptoms? The only thing they can tell you is you're going to get a dry vagina. That's the only thing they're certain on. In fact, that's the only thing you'll ever be diagnosed post. Like, you can lose your leg in a car accident and they'll go, well, you got a dry vagina. So...
Comedian Hannah Gatsby, her complaint, yes, it is difficult for women to get information, good information, especially from doctors sometimes about perimenopause. I don't think they spend a lot of time in med school on this. Jennifer, Amanda, go ahead and jump in here. Why is that?
Well, and I also think that in my experience, it's a challenge because it definitely takes a long time to have the conversation. So when you're looking at behavioral and lifestyle changes that can improve quality of life and some of those symptoms of perimenopause and the menopausal transition, or if you're looking at non-hormonal therapies that can make a difference for patients with hot flashes, or if you're looking at talking about systemic hormone therapy versus local hormone therapy, it's an extensive conversation. So I fully appreciate that it's definitely not one that there's sometimes time for.
Mm. And we do have, go ahead.
One thing I might add is I think there's not a lot of knowledge about the increased risk of mental health problems in the menopause transition, and also how early actually it becomes apparent. So you think of menopause, you think hot flashes, but in terms of psychology, what we find is that the increased risk of mental health problems occurs even before the onset of hot flashes. So it's not all triggered by, poor sleep and hot flashes necessarily, but actually by the hormone changes that occur in the early to mid 40s, and even prior to any hot flashes being experienced. So I think especially somebody who has a history of mental health problems, they might notice in their 40s, a resurgence of their symptoms, maybe that they had been previously well controlled. And you don't necessarily link that with perimenopause, right? Because they're not yet experiencing those other symptoms. But
Right.
it actually is part of the same whole process.
It still fits the picture. Interesting. And we have the phone lines are still open, and you're calling in at 1-800-716-2221. You were just hearing Jennifer Gordon there, and she is the director of the Women's Mental Health Research Unit at the University of Regina. She's also an associate professor of psychology. Sandra is on the line from Regina. And Sandra, I'd love to welcome you to this conversation. How's menopause going for you?
Well, I'm probably almost on the other side of it, but I'm very delighted that I got to talk after Hannah's piece, because that was awesome. And the one thing that you guys are just starting to talk about is the real mental health strain that comes on women. And I think I'm a coach who works with women in midlife, so I have a tendency to come across these women who are very resistant to see what's happening to them as being menopause. And having that conversation about how taboo it is to speak about it, and how taboo it is to seek out help for it and seek out knowledge. And I'm very glad you guys are talking about it today.
Well, and Sandra, just in your own circles, how have you made it less taboo? Like just throwing it out there and seeing what happens, or how have you made it work?
Part of it is just for us to start talking about it. And when comedians like Hannah talk about it, that helps. For me, it was a real long process. I'm in my mid-50s now. And so I've been through a lot of those things. And I had a naturopath, and I'm hearing all of what everybody's saying. I was really searching for that. But the thing I would look back on now is how much it impacted my mental health, my ability to deal with stress. I'm starting to understand the link between menopause and cortisol. which maybe your guest could talk about, and understanding that, there are people out there that can help, and start talking to them. It's time for us to start talking about this with each other.
Sandra, thank you so much for talking to us about it today. That is Sandra, who gave us a call at 1-800-716-2221. And Jennifer Gordon, I'll let you respond there. Just in terms of when we're talking about mental health and how the plummeting hormones really do take their toll, what kinds of mental health symptoms or red flags, or at least yellow flags, should we be noticing?
The most research has been done on depressive symptoms, though we're starting to recognize more and more that anxiety can also be an issue. But it's really interesting what the caller mentioned. Increased sensitivity to stress is actually one of the biggest problems or biggest mechanisms that we think is involved. So in my research, for example, we've taken perimenopausal women who have been exposed to greater hormone fluctuation, estrogen fluctuation specifically, and kind of put them through this task, this laboratory-based task where they have to give a speech in front of a panel of judges. And then they have to do this stressful mental arithmetic task where, they're adding up and subtracting numbers. And we find that women who have been exposed to greater estrogen fluctuation, like we are in the menopause transition, they respond greater to that physiologically and psychologically. So that's what that's sort of what we're thinking is going on, is that women are kind of, when they're exposed to this huge estrogen fluctuation, they are more sensitive to daily stressors in their life, things that maybe wouldn't have bugged them before. It bugs them, or they might find themselves, thinking about it more than they would have. It keeps them up at night a little bit more. So it's, it might be subtle, but yeah, that's the idea, that they're walking around a little more sensitive, and that just increases the risk of depressive symptoms occurring if they encounter a big life stress, like, a parent dying or experiencing divorce or financial hardship, things that maybe otherwise they would have been pretty resilient and they could have gotten through without experiencing full-blown depression. They're a little bit less resilient because of that hormone fluctuation they're going through, is the idea.
Does that eventually even out, or no?
Yes, that's the good news, is that it is temporary. There's an increase in mental health problems, but then later in the postmenopausal phase, mental health problems, the rate of mental health problems decreases considerably compared to the rest of their reproductive lifespan. So it's a window of vulnerability, but so that's the good news, is that it's temporary.
All right. We are listening to Jennifer Gordon, who's an associate professor of psychology and the director of the Women's Mental Health Research Unit at the U of R. Just ahead, we're going to be talking with Tanya Capo. Now, she's a member of the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, and she has been putting together a series of sort of like video talks and sessions for Indigenous women about their experiences and traditional teachings about menopause. Now, we're going to come to Tanya in a moment, but the phone lines are open, and we'll take a call here from Ravia, who is in Saskatoon. Hello there, Ravia. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you so much for this topic. This is like such an important topic, and we, like, including me, I don't have much information about it. I do Google it, but it's just the Google info.
Yeah. Is there any question that you have for either of our guests, for Amanda or for Jennifer?
Yes, it's about like early menopause. Like my mom, she had an early menopause. My grandma had one, and then my mom, she had quite a hard time, and she couldn't find proper treatment even she was over with it. And I don't want to go through that at like her. And I'm 35 right now, but I am willing to learn about it. So in case if I get early, like what will be the early systems? Will they be different from the regular menopause? And if I don't, if I in case get it, where should I go? Or do my family doctor? Or what can I do? What steps can I take to have a smooth transition?
I like this. It's advanced planning. And Amanda, I'm going to let you jump in here. This is Amanda Scollan, who's a nurse practitioner and a certified menopause practitioner out of Regina. What do you say, Amanda? How can she get ready?
Hi. Oh, that's good. I love it when people are prepared in advance. And there definitely is a genetic link between mums and daughters. And if they went through an early menopause, that can indicate, not necessarily exclusively, but can make you more likely to have an early menopause. So your experience with symptoms will be the same as anyone else's. And truth be told, every single woman experiences perimenopause and menopause differently. Some women kind of coast through. Some women suffer terribly with hot flashes and depression and anxiety, sleep disruption, mood changes, everything. So it's really woman to woman. But definitely, I always tell women it's important to optimize your health at age 35 if you're considering wanting to preserve your fertility. Sometimes if you're not done with childbearing years and there's that history of an early menopause, it's important to have a conversation with your doctor, so that they can look at, egg freezing or those sorts of things. But as far as the perimenopausal symptoms go, it can be like everyone else. And I like that you're Googling things, but like you've appreciated already, sometimes the information that we get out there isn't accurate. So I always like to direct women to the North American Menopause Society. It's a fantastic resource for not only women, but also providers. They've got lots of evidence-based information on pretty much all of the symptoms that women tend to struggle with through that perimenopausal and menopausal transition.
Well, and this is also where, I don't know, Ravia, I'm not sure if you work out or anything, but we talk a lot about losing bone density along with the estrogen and progesterone. Is there anything you can do in your 30s to start building that bone density so you don't lose as much?
Yeah, so it's really important for all women to make sure that we're optimizing our calcium and vitamin D intake. So before menopause, we need at least 1,000 milligrams or 3 servings a day of calcium and around 1,000 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D. And the recommendations recently changed from just being 6 months a year to actually being year-round when we're this far north of the equator. And the other piece is once you you're done with your periods, it increases to 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day or 4 servings of dairy-related sources a day. The other piece is it's very important for us to be participating in weight-bearing activity. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you go to the gym and pump iron, but even with our own body weight, such activities like yoga is incredibly helpful as we age. And the weight-bearing activity is also important because it's not only a loss of skeletal strength and structure, but we also start to lose muscle mass at an alarming rate. So that increases our risk for falls, and also our metabolism starts to slow down more when we don't have as much muscle mass. So from a weight maintenance perspective, the exercise piece is very, very important.
Okay, so Ravia, we've got this. You talk to your family doctor, go look at the North American Menopause Society website, take some calcium and vitamin D and weight-bearing activities. There's a whole laundry list there for you.
Yeah, and thank you so much. There's a lot of good information, and thank you very much.
And Jackie writes, I was put on an estrogen gel for menopause, then taken off for fear of cancer. So Jackie says she still puts up with hot flashes at age 70, but she says she's chosen that she'd rather put up with them than risk cancer. Again, everyone's different, and we love hearing from you. Now, Tanya Capo has a different approach to menopause. She's looking at it through an Indigenous lens. She's a member of the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, and she's been working with Indigenous women right across this country, putting together online discussions for Indigenous women to take part in, discussions that explore the different parts of menopause. And Tanya's on the line now. Hello there. Welcome to Blue Sky. Hey, when it comes to menopause, like in your own life, what kinds of answers did you realize you were looking for?
Oh, answers to everything. I was expecting the usual, like hot flashes and, change in your menstrual cycle until it's totally gone. But there were other things I had no idea would come along with it. So suddenly I had questions about everything. And so in thinking about these other symptoms that I was experiencing, it caused me to think about, well, how did my ancestors deal with this menopause? Is there some traditional medicines or something that we have in our culture and our knowledge that would help me through this? So this is how this whole conversation started, is trying to find out how did Indigenous people, Indigenous women deal with menopause.
Well, and I know Sturgeon Lake is Cree, and in terms of that side of the culture, what knowledge have women managed to pass down?
Interestingly, Christy Belcourt and me have been doing these discussions on menopause, and in our conversations, we were talking about, okay, well, I'm going to ask my mom, or I'm going to ask my auntie, and we ask questions, and it seems to be that maybe for at least a couple of generations, there hasn't been much conversations about it. So it's causing, like, the people that we ask are like some of our elderly relatives, for them to think about, gee, yeah, how did, to really think about how far back can we go to find these things out? And, well, we're still having those conversations and still trying to find out.
Well, and Tanya, for you, would you say that menopause felt like something to celebrate, like a rite of passage?
I would say so, and I think that was sort of the biggest thing that I was looking for. It was tickling in my brain, and it started to emerge more and more as something I wanted to find out more about. Because when you think about it, if you get menopause or start your transition into menopause in your mid to late 40s, and you live to be 80 or so, then you spend half of your life in this physical state. And there's all kinds of ceremonies and celebrations for other phases in your life, such as having your first menstrual cycle, and if you give birth to children, there's these different celebrations and rites of passage. And to me, it made sense in my mind, at least, that there should be one for menopause.
Ah, and I think it's worth noting these weird hormone fluctuations that especially women experience in their 40s into their 50s. They do fade into the background. It does calm down. Your 60s, 70s, it's supposed to be smoother sailing ahead. Amanda and Jennifer, you're welcome to come weigh in here, too, if Tanya has said anything that kind of caught your ear. I know that I'm so curious just about, are there traditional teachings? And it sounds like a number of them have been lost. Hey, Tanya?
I'm hoping not lost, but we definitely have to do some more digging.
Misplaced. Okay.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, Amanda, anything you'd weigh in with there?
I think one discussion point that's come up when in collaborating with other people who do research on menopause is this issue of, I guess, being careful about what language we use with menopause, and do we describe it as this terrible experience, and expect it to be awful, and then I guess on the other end of the spectrum is really minimizing it and saying, oh no, everything's fine. There's you're a few hot flashes here and there. It's not a big deal. So finding some balance that acknowledges that, invalidating people's experience, those who do have a hard time with it. But this idea of celebrating, this rite of passage, I love that idea too, because it's, it's great that you're experiencing menopause. It means that you've lived long enough to experience menopause. Once upon a time, the human race didn't have menopause because everybody, no one lived that long enough to experience it. So,
it is a blessing. It is a blessing to live this long. This is true. And Tanya, I know that you've had a number of sessions that you've recorded along with Christy Belcourt. What have you called the name of your group, this online discussion group?
Well, part of our initial thinking about what do we want to do, what do we want to talk about, was trying to find out what did it mean to us before. So we wanted to know, what did we call it in Cree? What was this part of our life called in our language? And so we decided, we asked around, we had some conversations with language speakers, and decided that we would call our discussions, what we found out was the more common reference for menopause, which is in Cree, it's Notagweopongegewen, which means the grandmother stops visiting, because the reference to the grandmother visiting you is your menstrual cycle. The old lady comes to visit you once a month. And so she stops visiting you is basically menopause, loosely translated.
Ah, okay. And if our listeners are curious or they'd like to see some of the sessions you recorded, what's the best way to find them, Tanya?
We recorded them, and then Christy uploaded them to her YouTube channel. So just Google Christy Belcourt YouTube, and then you should be able to find the sessions. We started with a couple of elders, and then we had some a medical doctor come on to talk about symptoms and stuff, and then we wanted to do stuff like support. So our most recent one, we spoke with someone about community organizing for women as a way to respond to menopause and the challenges and the questions and all of that.
All right. Well, Tanya, I wish you well with it. I think a lot of people would like to get in on those discussions. So thank you for telling us about it today.
Thank you so much.
And before I let you go, I know that you're from Sturgeon Lake. Just how are your friends and family there holding up with the wildfires?
It's been really stressful. It's still really stressful. I don't live there, but I'm in constant communication. The whole community has been evacuated, and the fire is still being fought in and around the community. So it's been quite stressful, to say the least.
Oh, well, if you could please just pass on our well wishes. We do have a number of people who, they've had to leave their homes because of wildfires, especially along the western border of Saskatchewan. Just wish them well for us, Tanya, and thank you so much for being here on Blue Sky today.
Thank you so much again. Have a good day.
You too. That's Tanya Capo with a K. She's one of the organizers of a series of online discussions centering this Indigenous perspective on menopause. And you can go find them on Christy Belcourt's YouTube channel. And you can also look for Tanya Capo out on Facebook. Again, Capo with the letter K. Now, we do have on the line with us right now Jennifer Gordon, who's an associate professor of psychology and the director of the Women's Mental Health Research Unit at the University of Regina. Amanda Scollan is also with us. She's a nurse practitioner, a certified menopause practitioner, and she joins us from our Regina studio. And for you both, I've got a few emails that have been rolling in to bluesky@cbc.ca. We also have our open line at 1-800-716-2221 if you have a question for one of our guests. I know that we got this email from Vanessa who said, "What do your guests recommend for hormone replacement therapy or other ways of easing menopause? I have recently gone to my doctor with menopausal complaints such as headaches, brain fog, extreme fatigue, poor sleep, irritability, on and on. He ordered blood work, but so far there's no plan for addressing my concerns." So I'll put this out to you. Amanda, maybe first, and then Jennifer. What would you recommend for Vanessa in terms of HRT, hormone replacement therapy, or other ways of easing her symptoms?
That's a challenging question because every patient's different, and there are lots of options. And I clearly don't know her entire health picture or her lab work, so it's always an individualized conversation about risks and benefits because hormone therapy is safer for some patients than others. But otherwise, generally speaking, the transdermal estrogens are safer than taking it orally just because it decreases the risk of a blood clot a little bit. And then most women tolerate biochemically identical micronized progesterone rather than a synthetic progestin better. So if she is a good candidate and looking at options for systemic hormone therapy, then that combination tends to be the safest of the options that we have available.
Okay. And Vanessa, you may also want to just bring up, hey, it's been in the news lately. I see the Canadian Medical Association journal is saying when there are debilitating symptoms, please consider HRT. I hope that it goes well with your doctor. Do you also, Jennifer, would you like to weigh in on this just in terms of especially the irritability, the extreme fatigue, the brain fog that Vanessa mentioned?
Yeah. A few years back, we conducted a trial of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is it's available in Regina actually, and there are groups run in Saskatchewan as well. And so we randomized people to either participate in 8 weekly mindfulness-based stress reduction groups or a waitlist control group. And we found that those who underwent the mindfulness program had much better mental health problems. They had less bothersome menopausal symptoms. So even if symptoms are triggered by hormonal changes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't improve them through behavioral changes. So mindfulness seems to have a lot of promise for coping with mental health symptoms in the menopause transition, but also the physical symptoms and making them more bearable.
Got it. Okay. And we have another email here, bluesky@cbc.ca. And Donna has emailed after she heard a little earlier on the show, I also tried red clover. For me, it works well. However, it does not help with bone density loss. I've seen many middle-aged women with broken arms, etc. They fell when walking the dog. And I'd just like to remind women to get a bone density test. And Amanda, is that something that is pretty standard or no?
It really, again, it's individualized. It depends on the patient. It depends on their risk factors. It depends if they've had a fragility fracture, so a fracture from a fall height that we wouldn't expect to actually break a bone in their family history. So like anything in healthcare, unfortunately, resources are limited. So it's not something that just everyone can say, I want a bone density scan at age 30 and with no family risk factors and get one. But it really is one of those things that if you're concerned about it, or if you've had a fracture from a fall at stand height, it's something that should be explored.
If you have a family history of osteoporosis or bone-related disease, is that also worth mentioning to your doctor?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things about the menopause conversation is that we're all advocating for ourselves with our family physicians, and that we want to not only be screened, but that we deserve care at whatever that capacity looks like for each individual patient. I think Tanya had mentioned previously, and it's absolutely true, what's changed dramatically is that we now have half of our lives up to in a menopausal state. So I think oftentimes people are told, it's just natural that you go through this. This is a natural change and a natural transition. But you absolutely, historically, we didn't live that long. So it's important to advocate for yourself and not suffer with symptoms, because menopause is mandatory, but suffering is definitely optional.
Oh, that is so good to hear. And I've often thought about, okay, whoever my ancestors were 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years ago, they didn't have a pantry full of food or a fridge or all the things that, like it's the weight gain, mood changes, things like this that we weren't necessarily built for, were we?
No, you'd probably have, 10 to 15 babies during the course of your lifetime and then die within a few short years of menopause. So this longevity is a relatively new phenomenon in the whole history of humans, and I think we can do better for ourselves.
Absolutely. And we've got so many emails coming to bluesky@cbc.ca. I will try to get to as many as I can. Linda has emailed that 15 years ago, my girlfriend and I spotted an ad in the Star Phoenix for an information night about menopause, sponsored by the U of S. Well, the feature speaker was a gynecologist, and it was standing room only in this large hotel ballroom. Most of the women, well-dressed women in that 40 to 60-year-old age group. But it was the younger women voicing the most distressing symptoms. Before the session, I thought menopause was just the end of periods, occasional hot flashes. What these women were describing was debilitating joint pain, heavy bleeding, vaginal dryness. Some had to take time off of work. The physician was excellent at describing the cycle of perimenopause, but there just didn't seem to be many treatment options. Remember, this is an email from 15 years ago. At that time, hormone replacement didn't get much attention. There seemed like there was so much more negative press than a positive result. And when we left the ballroom, my friend and I just felt blessed. Our symptoms were slight compared to others. Well, fast forward to today, and Linda says she has been taking Premarin, and her UTIs and vaginal discomfort, they're gone. So they've decreased at least. And she says so many women have been scared to seek help, and their suffering needs to be addressed. And I think it's a point worth making. The suffering is not forever, is it? I'll put this to you, Jennifer. It's not like this forever. You go through this transition. It's like almost being a teenager again. And then things do get better on the other end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of mental health and that increased sensitivity to stress, it definitely decreases. And throughout the reproductive lifespan, women are at higher risk for problems like depression, for example, compared to men. But that gender difference actually goes away in older age. So overall, mental health problems actually, decrease even lower than they were previously. But after this period of time where there is a blip where there's an increased risk for mental health problems. So in the long term, things actually do look better than they were before.
All right. And we also have people looking at, there's an email from Sherry who I'm just going to have to condense here, but she's asking, is there more work being done to show the importance of progesterone as well as what estrogen does in terms of a hormone for women's health? She says that a number of doctors, she's found it's frustrating, they won't consider progesterone therapy. Where do you sit with that, Jennifer?
I mean, my background is in on the mental health side of things. Progesterone typically sort of has a bad rep, actually. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, like severe PMS, is thought to be triggered especially by increases in progesterone. So having progesterone therapy would definitely not be indicated for somebody who has a history of sort of premenstrual symptoms, earlier on. In terms of medical benefits, I'm not sure. Maybe Amanda can weigh in. In terms of mental health, I typically it's associated with worse mental health outcomes.
And Amanda, I know that Sherry has written it's helped her personally immensely with her sleep and even out her cycles as she gets through perimenopause. Just your thoughts on the role of progesterone?
Again, it's individualized. It really depends on the patient, but it definitely a little bit of luteal phase progesterone support for the right patient. So kind of timed with their cycle. So during that perimenopausal transition, for certain patients, sometimes doing a little bit of progesterone day 12 through day 26 can help with heavy menstrual periods, can help a little bit with some hot flashes during that period of time. But typically it's not something that we look at unless it's in conjunction with systemic estrogen hormone therapy to protect against endometrial cancer after menopause.
Okay, and the last word, I mean, we've been talking all about menopause today. If you have thoughts, we'd love to still hear them. bluesky@cbc.ca. But in terms of talking about all the hard parts and the bad parts, is there anything we can do to give women more power and to make people not feel too fearful about this transition?
Well, I think knowledge is power. So, like I said, the North American Menopause Society is a fantastic resource for women to get accurate, evidence-based, up-to-date information, rather than just Googling and kind of making decisions based on other people's experiences or not, because we definitely all have different experiences. And it really is one of those things, this stage of life, I feel like, is an opportune time to really lean into healthy lifestyles, eating well, taking care of ourselves, if we're at a stage where we have a little bit more time to carve out for stress management and all of those things, because it's not just about the symptoms that we experience now, it's about decreasing those long-term health risks.
Indeed. And Jennifer, last word to you, just we can get through this, right?
Yeah. And I, thinking about promoting good mental health, as we age, having a good social support network is really important as well. Studies find that those with the biggest, network of social support live the longest and are the healthiest. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. Amanda, thank you.